Hi, my name is Debbie Lee, and I'd like to thank Andrew and David and the other panelists for letting me join this important forum. I'm just going to read an essay that I wrote, and it's right here on my screen, and it's called Imagine It. In shorts and flip-flops, I padded along the sidewalk that led to a single brick house. The sidewalk curved like a gentle hug, and I swayed with nervous excitement. The house was perched on a hill overlooking the Ohio River, a great seam holding two worlds together, Kentucky over there, Ohio here. The house was small, silent. I tried the doors, shut tight. A few feet away, a white man with a graying beard was reclining under a granddaddy maple. Hello, I said. He grunted as he sat up and answered my questions. Yes, he was the caretaker of this here John Rankin house. No, I could not go in the house. I could stay on the ground for 15 minutes, no longer. I scowled. Oh, things have changed since COVID, he said. Even though I drove to this little town of Ripley, Ohio, all the way from Chicago, I pleaded. Though I had spent 12 years of my life studying slavery and abolition, I thought. I had once traveled all over England to archives, libraries, museums, and landmarks, researching the wretched institution. But I had a tenuous understanding of slavery's legacy in America, my homeland. I had come here to learn more. He laid back down and pulled a straw hat over his face. I made my way to the slate steps of the house. Time compressed, distilled into a shimmer. It had been 25 years since I'd read The History of Mary Prince, published in 1831 in London, and learned about the many selves one had to develop to survive slavery. Up to that time, I'd been drawn to the winged rhythms of the Romantic poets, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats. By comparison, Prince's story felt breathy, bone close, especially her silences, what she started to say but didn't, the places where English words failed her. From that moment on, I spent my career trying to find Prince's ghostly gaps and other Black voices under the verses of the British poets. But as I stood on the Rankin House grounds, I was beginning to realize I'd also spent my career addressing slavery at an academic remove, as if it were someone else's problem. Why? Perhaps it was easier to map those events onto some other place and some other time in a language stripped of emotion. Suddenly, a Black man in a blue polo shirt and expensive leather shoes was standing beside me. He introduced himself as Brian. He had driven over to the Rankin house from Cincinnati. This place is about to close, I said gently and gestured to the caretaker lounged under the maple. Brian folded his arms across his chest as if nothing could be further from the truth. Can you imagine, he said, speaking easily. He pointed to the green lip of Kentucky on the other side of the river and told me about the thousands of people who had crossed in the 1800s. The river was much narrower then, he explained, and during low rainfall or a high freeze, some parts could be traversed on foot. People flocked to Ripley from all points in the South, many in bare feet, he went on. They would have heard stories of this tiny town on the river and the chain of people, both Black and white, working the Underground Railroad together. They would have known also about the sheriff's deputies and bounty hunters with their bloodhounds. Though Ohio was a free state, it was subject to the Fugitive Slave Act. Not only was it illegal to hide or aid those who had escaped bondage, but Northerners were legally bound to help capture freedom seekers. Many did just the opposite. Brian and I learned we were the same age. Our daughters were the same age. We were both wearing masks, and mine started to feel uncomfortable. I needed air. I wanted to take it off, wanted him to remove his. I didn't want our faces covered, even as I forced that thought from my head. If you're interested in abolition, he said, you should visit the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati. He'd been there many times, had taken his daughters when they were young to the children's section. It was real hands-on, he continued, but it was hard. One exhibit showed white men and women shouting to Black children, take them away, we don't want to see those, expletive. Brian took off his glasses and rubbed his damp eyes. Excuse me, he said, I didn't mean to get emotional. We were silent for a while. I don't know how long, but I do know I was beset by an urgent ache, mixed with a sense of cowardice and questions I'd been avoiding my entire life, especially in my relationships with my African American colleagues and friends, with whom I'd never spoken in detail about the family stories they carried inside them. I'm camped at Scioto Trail National Park, I said awkwardly, mainly just to say something. Brian's eyes glinted in recognition. His father's family, he said, gesturing toward the river, was originally from Kentucky, and they had settled up near Scioto. They most certainly would have come through this portal here at Ripley, he said. Think of it. This small town was the most active on the Underground Railroad. Ripley had 6 cobblers. He laughed. All those cobblers fashioning shoes for people who crossed the river. Those shoes they got in Ripley were often the first pair they owned. Something drew my attention away. The caretaker was walking toward us, tapping his watch. A hard-boiled egg formed in my chest. I felt my mind desperately clawing back to the moment I had arrived and doing the impossible, resetting the clock so I could stay on this hill for a long, long time. Brian didn't seem to notice the caretaker or my mood shift. Or maybe he did, because he said, I come here as often as I can and just try to imagine it. Imagine it. Ibram X. Kendi, in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, explains that self-reflection is the key to anti-racist work. Like fighting an addiction, he writes, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. I believe one powerful form that scholars can use for anti-racist work is the personal essay. The form encourages writers to splay themselves bare, to look closely at their own prejudices, flaws, quirks, biases, and invites readers to do the same. Moreover, the personal essay listens. It centers voices of those outside the study of literary texts and academic institutions. In fact, experimentation is built into the form's undisciplined nature. It trades in the language of doubt, ambivalence, speculation, contradiction, and complexity, allowing writers and readers to investigate the mysterious, ungraspable moments when incongruous events collide and reveal something new. A world slowed down, yet fully alive. This is true of the essays of Montaigne through the heyday of the form during the Romantic period, including personal stories like that of Mary Prince, even despite the fact that hers was mediated by an English woman. Some of today's most talented writers specialize in the personal essay. Teju Cole, Eula Biss, Maggie Nelson, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Roxane Gay, Sven Burkert, to name just a few. But why is the personal essay all but banned from formal scholarship? This is a question I've been asking myself for years. Yet sometimes I can imagine it. A scholarly field where the personal essay counts as high academic discourse, where the self-reflective form is as welcome in the Keats-Shelley Journal or Studies in Romanticism as it is in the Los Angeles Review of Books and the Paris Review. Thank you.